Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited that you guys are here. In last week's video, we talked about tools for SEO, and I kind of wanted to jump back to a few topics that I talked about a couple weeks ago about grief and loss, because I do think that is still an important topic and we should still talk about it. And as you guys may know, that's kind of what I specialize in. So in today's video, I really want to talk about dealing with grief and loss as a parent, but how it affects your relationships. And before we get into this video, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that spots for my one-to-one have opened up. So if you'd like to schedule a free consult, I'll leave the link down below. And just so you guys know, this consult is for those, again, who are maybe going through grief and loss. They're trying to shake the temper, relieve their grief, relieve their guilt, relieve their stress, any kind of thing like that, and also stay connected in your relationships or regain connection in your relationships with your kids. And make sure you stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to be giving away a free guide that I have also used, some tips and tricks that have allowed me to stay connected in my relationships as I've gone through grief and loss. So with that being said, let's get into the video. For those of you who don't know, I kind of just wanted to give a brief backstory. I've talked about this in numerous videos, but my backstory on grief and what I've experienced, I think it's really important to stay authentic and true to you guys. So, you know, I've gone through a lot of grief in my life, and I've kind of been able to move through it in different ways that maybe not a lot of people talk about. I mentioned in videos that everyone goes through the grieving process in a different way. Some can reach out to people around them and try to stay connected and, you know, look for help, while others may retreat and not want to talk about it and just try to distract themselves with other things like work and, you know, just things that will take their mind off of what they're feeling on the inside. There's all other sorts of things that people do when they're going through grief and loss, but I think those are the two main ends of the spectrum. So to give you a little bit of background on my story, I kind of struggled with a little bit of social anxiety when I was younger. I mentioned in previous videos that I was diagnosed with a selective mutism, which is an anxiety disorder in which you have a phobia to speak. So that pretty much, you know, took over my childhood up until the age I was like probably preteens. And then after that, it still became difficult to, you know, connect with others, especially coming from a place where I wasn't speaking at all and remaining in the same field of kids around me. It was very difficult to transition even once I did regain my voice back. Again, I struggled with weight issues because of that, and, you know, other family issues going on. So that was a big contribution of the lack of friendships that I had as well. And around the time I was 15, my father passed away. And shortly after, I kind of disconnected from my mother as well as my sisters. Over the years, we had gone through a lot of things with my mother, and I kind of remained on the sidelines for the most of it while my sisters retreated, and it became very difficult. I was living with my aunt and uncle, who I'm very thankful for because they took us in when we had nobody. So that was also extremely difficult, but again, I think I processed it in a very different way from my sisters. They had gone to therapy, I had chosen not to. I was still stuck in my way of kind of not talking about the way I was feeling, and that's how I processed it and coped with it. I kind of just dealt with it on my own, and I didn't really like to talk about it with anyone. And I think because of that, the grieving process for me became much longer, but I just held everything in. So I kind of, in ways, maybe had a little bit of an anger problem. And to this day, I still struggle with it. But again, that's something I'm working on. And, you know, my sisters were very different. But just long story short, I had regained connection with my mother. We worked on a lot of things where my sisters still don't talk to her. And I completely understand where they're coming from. And, you know, we often talk about how we're still supportive of each other no matter what our choices are in having a relationship with her. And I have voiced my opinion about why I do, and they have voiced their opinion on why they don't. And, you know, it's still, to this day, it doesn't affect our relationship together. And hopefully that was a brief story, but Just to jump into today's video, I want to talk about how grief affects our relationships. And I think it's important to point out that there isn't a lot of stuff about the way parents deal with grief and how it affects their relationship with kids. Oftentimes, I do a little bit of research before filming this videos to include as much information as I can for you guys. And I didn't really find much, which was very disappointing because I think it's a very big struggle for parents. And oftentimes they don't really know what to look to or what to try or, who to talk to about all of this stuff. And again, I mentioned that grief and loss isn't just about losing somebody. It's about so much more. And I think it's even more important to talk about because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And that itself is a loss. We're losing our social interaction. We're losing our comfort. We're losing security. We're losing things that, every day we would normally have, but now we don't. And I've seen a lot of mothers in the group saying that, they've seen a behavioral change in their kids. And that's perfectly normal. Again, they're going through a loss as well, and so are you. So it's kind of difficult to reconnect when we're not connected with ourselves. And I talked about this in a video a couple weeks ago. I'll link it down below for you guys. But, it's not talked about enough. So I want to talk about it today. So for parents, the grieving process is very difficult, mostly because when they're dealing with grief, they have so much more to take on. The responsibility of being a parent alone is enough. And it's even harder when we can't communicate the way we're feeling to our kids because we feel like we have to shield them. Especially for younger kids, they don't know the scale of the loss that you're experiencing, and you don't really know how to address it. Sometimes we expect our close family and friends to be supportive, and we hope and anticipate that they'll be there for us and they'll be able to, and we'll be able to talk to them, but sometimes that's not the case. So we have to be that support system for ourselves, and that is very difficult. And I know from my own experiences, it was the only solution that I had, and it was very, very hard to go through. Sometimes it's even more difficult when we are a strong person and we like to take care of everyone around us, and we try to be that people pleaser. And when we experience a loss and we are in this vulnerable state, people around us often don't know how to act. So you'll see that people in your relationships often become disconnected when you yourself are going through a loss. And that's difficult. It's tough when you expect someone to be there for you, but they're not because they don't really know how to talk to you or handle the situation. So if I could give you guys a few tips, I'd probably mention these 3 things. And the first one, and I talked about this concept on one of my Facebook Lives, so if you guys aren't in the Facebook group Raising Independent and Confident Children, I urge you to join that because there are plenty of other women going through this same thing that you are probably experiencing. If you watch my videos, you probably are experiencing some of these problems that I talk about. So if you want to join a community that is experiencing that, I urge you to go down. I have left a link down below so that you can join the group. So I talked about this concept on my Facebook Live about being connected to ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest things that really helped me when I was going through all of the grief and loss that I was experiencing, was being able to find myself. And I did that through a couple of ways. I mentioned in the live that I tried journaling and just writing about it. One of the biggest transformations that I really experienced was after I hit a breaking point with my mom. I started writing down everything, like literally writing down my entire life story. And it really just helped me not only gaining a perspective on looking on the outside of what I was experiencing, but it also helped me map out why I was put in this position and how I was put in this position. It made me think about the reasons that maybe this had to happen for me. And I often have this philosophy that everything happens for a reason, and that's truly what got me through the death of my father, that this has to be for some reason. And I know it's really, really hard to have that mindset when you're going through a loss, but it's really the only thing, well, not the only thing, but it really helps you get a better understanding of the future and help you kind of move through this temporary stage that you're feeling right now, and taking the next steps to get to the next stage where maybe this was for a bigger reason. Maybe this was for something greater that's happening in the future. And I know it's hard to think about it like that, but that's what really helped me. So if you can get into that mindset, and maybe that comes from writing, maybe that comes from reading, maybe that comes from anything that, really helps you take a step back from your life, whether that's, going into nature, or that's another thing that I like to do as well, going for a walk. Something that just takes your mind off of the way that you're feeling so you can take a step back. So the second thing that I think really helped me was finding somebody who was going through the same process or who had experienced the same thing before. And I did that through reading like memoirs and success stories of people who came from something where they really struggled and they turned their life around and they're making a difference now, and they just turned this into something great, something to talk about, something to help others with. And that's kind of why I do what I do, because I know what it was like from not only my mother's perspective, but also my perspective as the child coming from someone who's experiencing grief and then experiencing grief myself. So I know the two sides of the story, and I think that's what really makes what I do so effective. So the last thing I think is finding support. And for me, this came at the later stage of my grieving process for a couple of reasons. Because one, I'm an introvert, and two, I suffer from social anxiety, which is ironic because I pretty much put myself out there on the internet. But I wasn't able to do that unless I went through this process, unless I found support from the people around me and I was explicit about the way I was feeling and not holding anything back. Because the more you hold inside, the more you risk yourself of losing your cool, losing your temper, getting angry at the smallest things. But it's because so much has built up that you can just flip a switch instantly. And it became very difficult for other people around me to be around me because I was just so on edge and there was so much tension. So I needed that release. I needed that support. And you can find it from so many people. You can find it from just having a mentor, going to counseling, whatever you prefer. Just making your emotions more explicit to your partner maybe, and even to your kids. And I think it's difficult because sometimes younger kids can't really process that kind of information. And you don't have to worry about being so explicit about your emotions, but just saying things that are age appropriate for them. So maybe if they're a little bit younger, mommy is feeling very sad. And you don't have to say why. You can just say that you're feeling sad. If they're older, maybe you can add a little bit more. And if they're older, you can add a little bit more onto that. But being explicit really matters because it's giving others around you a chance to have your perspective, and it's giving them a chance to understand. If you aren't explicit, they'll never know, and they'll just think that there's another reason. Maybe they'll think it's them. And so part of getting support is also being explicit and having a voice. So just to recap, the three main things that we just talked about were gaining perspective, voicing your opinion, and getting support. And these are the three main things if you are finding yourself struggling with connecting to your kids as you're moving through grief and loss. And I think it's so important that we just talked about it today because it's not talked about enough. There are plenty of things on the internet if you lost somebody and you're going through grief, how to talk to your partner if you're going through grief, and all these other things. But there's nothing if you're going through grief and loss as a parent and having that affect your relationship with your kids. Nobody talks about this. But everybody goes through it at some point in their life. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope you guys really got some use out of it. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to schedule for that free consult, I'll leave that link down below. And as I mentioned, that I'm going to be linking that free guide for going through grief and loss down below as well. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time.